Daughter of dead cop, walks into German Shepherd, auction alone. The reason why is shocking. Lot number 12, Rex Outstanding K9 Officer, starting bid is $500. The gravelly-voiced auctioneer announced his gavel poised above the podium as murmurs rippled through the warehouse crowd. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she thrust her hand into the air and shouted, "600! Every head in the room turned toward the teenage girl who had dared to bid against seasoned handlers and ranch owners. The leather-jacketed stranger, who had been methodically claiming dogs all evening, flashed a cold smile and raised his hand casually. 700! Maya refused to back down, her voice stronger. Now 800. The man's eyes narrowed dangerously as he growled 1,000. The auctioneer chuckled, clearly enjoying the drama. Can the young lady keep up? Maya's hands trembled as she summoned every ounce of courage her father had taught her. $1,200. The warehouse fell silent, the stranger's predatory stare boring into her, but he made no counteroffer. The gavel came down with finality. Rex belongs to the girl. If this thrilling story of courage and justice gripped you, subscribe for more incredible true crime stories like this video to help others discover it, and listen to our full audio collection of heart-pounding investigations. Your support helps us bring you more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot through the humid air of the converted warehouse in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, as 17-year-old Maya Rodriguez raised her hand with trembling fingers and shouted a number that made every head in the room turn toward her. $2,000. Her voice cut through the murmur of seasoned dog handlers, retired cops, and ranch owners who had gathered on this sweltering June evening for the annual Arizona Department of Public Safety K9 retirement auction. The man she was bidding against, a thick-set stranger in an expensive leather jacket who seemed completely out of place among the usual crowd of working-class buyers, turned to stare at her with cold, calculating eyes that made Maya's stomach clench with recognition she couldn't quite place. He had been methodically outbidding everyone else for the past 20 minutes, his voice never rising above a casual monotone as he claimed dog after dog with prices that far exceeded their market value. $2,100, the stranger said, his tone as flat and emotionless as before. But Maya caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested her interference was becoming an annoyance. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she looked at the German Shepherd in the auction ring 7-year-old Rex, whose intelligent amber eyes and battle-scarred muzzle told the story of a career spent tracking criminals through the Arizona desert. This wasn't just any retired police dog. This was her father's partner, the dog who had worked alongside Detective Carlos Rodriguez for 5 years before that terrible night 6 months ago when everything changed forever. $2,200. Maya called out, her voice stronger now despite the fact that she was using every dollar of her father's life insurance money and her college savings combined. The warehouse fell silent, except for the hum of industrial fans struggling against the desert heat. Rex shifted in his temporary kennel, his ears pricked forward as if he recognized something familiar about Maya's voice. The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment Maya thought she saw his hand move toward the inside of his jacket before he seemed to catch himself. Going once? Going twice? The auctioneer announced, his eyes moving between Maya and the mysterious bidder who had suddenly gone quiet. The leather-jacketed man stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor with a harsh sound that made several people flinch. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, but not before giving Maya a look that chilled her blood despite the oppressive heat. It wasn't anger or frustration at losing an auction. It was the calculating stare of a predator who had just identified new prey. "Sold to the young lady in the back for $2,200, the auctioneer announced, bringing his gavel down with finality. Maya's legs nearly gave out as she realized what she had just done. She had spent almost every penny she had in the world to buy back her father's partner, and in doing so, she had apparently made an enemy of someone who clearly had resources far beyond what any normal dog buyer should possess. As she made her way toward the payment table on unsteady legs, Rex's eyes tracked her movement through the crowd, and she could have sworn she saw recognition flicker in those amber depths. But it wasn't until she was signing the paperwork with hands that wouldn't stop shaking that she overheard two retired cops talking in low voices near the coffee station. "That's Carlos Rodriguez's kid. Poor girl doesn't know what she's gotten herself into. That dog knows too much for his own good." The comment hit Maya like a physical blow. What did Rex know? And why did the stranger want him badly enough to bid far above market value? As she looked back toward the exit, where the man in the leather jacket had disappeared, Maya felt the first stirring of a terrible suspicion that her father's death might not have been the random act of violence the department had claimed it was. 6 months earlier, Detective Carlos Rodriguez had been gunned down in what Phoenix PD officially classified as a drug deal gone wrong in the industrial district near Sky Harbor Airport. The department's narrative was clean and simple. Carlos had been investigating a tip about a major narcotics operation when he stumbled into an active transaction. The shooters had escaped in the chaos, leaving behind only shell casings, and Carlos's body sprawled across the asphalt beside his squad car. Maya had never believed the official story. Her father had been a 20-year veteran of the force, a methodical investigator who didn't take unnecessary risks and always called for backup when entering potentially dangerous situations. The idea that he would approach an active drug deal alone at night without coordinating with other units contradicted everything Maya knew about Carlos Rodriguez the cop and Carlos Rodriguez the father, who came home every night to help her with calculus homework. But Maya was 17, grieving and dismissed by adults who thought they were protecting her from harsh realities. The investigation was closed within 2 months, filed away as another casualty in the war on drugs that had claimed too many good cops over the years. The department moved on, the media found new stories to cover, and Maya was left with questions that no one seemed interested in answering. The inciting incident that changed everything came when Maya received a call from Sergeant Lisa Chen, the department's K-9 coordinator, informing her that Rex was being retired due to age and would be available for adoption at the upcoming auction. "Your father would have wanted you to have first choice," Sergeant Chen had said, her voice gentle but professional. "Rex has been having some adjustment issues since Carlos passed. The handlers say he's been unresponsive to commands and seems to be searching for something or someone. Maybe being with family would help him." Maya had initially planned to simply adopt Rex through normal channels, but when she called to arrange the adoption, she was told that all retired K-9s were required to go through the public auction process to ensure transparency and fair pricing. The news had disappointed her, but she was determined to bring her father's partner home regardless of the cost. What Maya didn't know was that her phone calls to the department had been monitored, and word of her interest in Rex had reached people who had very specific reasons for wanting the dog to disappear permanently. Detective Marcus Webb Carlos's former partner and closest friend on the force had tried to dissuade Maya from attending the auction. Webb was a 15-year veteran with graying temples and tired eyes who had been struggling with his own guilt over Carlos's death. "Maya, honey, maybe it's better to let sleeping dogs lie," Webb had said during an awkward visit to her apartment the week before the auction. "Rex is trained for police work, not family life. He might not adjust well to civilian living." But Maya had detected something in Webb's tone that suggested his concerns went beyond simple worry about dog behavior. There was a nervousness in his manner, a reluctance to meet her eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of how adults had acted during the weeks following her father's funeral, like they were all sharing a secret that she wasn't supposed to know about. "Detective Webb," Maya had said, using the formal title deliberately, "is there something about Rex that you're not telling me? Something about why my father was really killed?" Webb's reaction had been swift and decisive. "Your father died because he was doing his job, Maya. Don't go looking for conspiracies where there aren't any. It'll only cause you more pain." But it was precisely that kind of dismissive response that had convinced Maya she needed to pursue every possible avenue for answers, including Rex. If there was even a chance that her father's partner had witnessed something important that night, or if there was some reason why certain people didn't want Rex in civilian hands, then Maya was determined to find out what it was. The decision to attend the auction had crystallized when Maya discovered that several of the other retired canines being auctioned had been requested specifically by private buyers who had submitted sealed bids weeks in advance. Rex was the only dog without prearranged interest, which struck Maya as odd given his impressive service record and the general demand for trained German shepherds. Now standing in the warehouse parking lot with Rex's leash in her hand and the memory of the stranger's threatening stare burned into her mind, Maya realized that she had crossed a line from which there would be no retreat. She was no longer just a grieving daughter trying to honor her father's memory by adopting his partner. She was actively challenging forces that had killed once before and clearly had no qualms about doing so again. Rex pressed against her leg as they walked toward her car, his warm bulk a reassuring presence in the gathering darkness. For the first time in months, Maya felt like she wasn't facing her questions alone. Whatever secrets her father had died protecting, whatever truth Rex might know about that night 6 months ago, they would uncover it together. The real investigation was just beginning. The first sign that Maya had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple dog adoption came the next morning when she woke to find her apartment building's parking garage filled with unfamiliar vehicles. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were positioned at strategic points around the structure, their occupants invisible but undoubtedly watching. Rex had been restless all night, pacing Maya's small apartment and stopping frequently at the windows to stare out at the street below. The dog's behavior wasn't random anxiety. It was the controlled alertness of a trained police animal who sensed potential threats in his environment. "Easy boy," Maya whispered, stroking Rex's fur as she peered through her blinds at the surveillance vehicles. "We're going to figure this out together." But figuring it out proved more complicated than Maya had anticipated. Her first attempt to research Rex's service history through official channels was blocked by bureaucratic walls that seemed designed to frustrate rather than inform. The department's public records office claimed that K-9 operational files were classified for officer safety reasons, and her requests for information about her father's final case were met with form letters directing her to speak with Detective Webb. Webb himself had become increasingly difficult to reach, and when Maya finally cornered him at the police station, his demeanor had shifted from protective concern to barely concealed hostility. "Maya, you need to drop this before you get yourself hurt," Webb said, glancing nervously around the busy precinct bullpen. "There are things about your father's death that you don't understand, and some stones are better left unturned." "What things?" Maya demanded. "Detective Webb, you were my father's partner. If there's something about his case that doesn't add up, don't you think I have a right to know?" Webb's response was to escort her firmly toward the exit. "Go home, Maya. Take care of your dog, focus on finishing high school, and forget about playing detective. Trust me, it's for your own good." But Maya's determination only intensified when she discovered that someone had been inside her apartment while she was at the police station. Nothing was stolen, but subtle signs indicated a professional search books slightly out of place on shelves, drawers that didn't quite close the way she had left them, and Rex's behavior suggesting that strangers had been in his new territory. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Carlos's former informant, a small-time drug dealer named Tommy Vasquez, who had been feeding information to Maya's father for the past 2 years. Tommy reached out through a mutual acquaintance requesting a clandestine meeting at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Phoenix. "Your pops was working on something big when he got killed." Tommy revealed over coffee that he was too nervous to drink. "Something about dirty cops moving product through the evidence lockup. He said he was close to proving it, but he needed one more piece of evidence to make his case." Maya's blood chilled as the implications became clear. "Are you saying my father was killed by other police officers?" "I'm saying your pops was asking questions that made important people nervous," Tommy replied, his eyes constantly scanning the diner for potential threats. "He told me he had a backup plan, something about insurance in case things went sideways. Said Rex would know where to find it if anything happened to him." The revelation that Rex might actually possess knowledge crucial to Carlos's investigation added urgency to Maya's situation. If her father had hidden evidence of police corruption and used Rex as some kind of safeguard, then the dog's value extended far beyond sentimental attachment. Rex wasn't just a retired K-9. He was potentially the key to exposing the people responsible for Carlos's murder. Maya's investigation took on new focus as she began researching her father's arrest patterns, looking for connections between cases he had worked and evidence that might have gone missing from the department's lockup. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Several major drug busts that Carlos had been involved in had resulted in suspiciously light seizures of narcotics, and in multiple cases, key evidence had been reported as damaged or destroyed before trial dates. The stakes escalated dramatically when Maya received her first direct threat. A note left on her car windshield contained no signature, but its message was unambiguous. "Stop digging or join your father. This is your only warning." Rex's training proved invaluable as Maya began to suspect that her movements were being monitored. The dog's ability to detect surveillance and his protective instincts provided an early warning system that allowed Maya to vary her routines and avoid potential confrontations. But she knew that she was running out of time to find whatever evidence Carlos had hidden before his killers decided that she posed too great a risk to leave alive. The most disturbing development came when Maya learned that she wasn't the only person asking questions about Rex. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the veterinarian who had been treating the K9 unit dogs for the past decade, contacted Maya with alarming news. Someone called pretending to be from the insurance company asking about Rex's medical history, Dr. Mitchell reported. They wanted to know if he had ever been fitted with any kind of tracking device or if your father had ever brought him in for unusual procedures. When I told them that information was confidential, they got very aggressive. Maya felt the walls closing in around her as she realized that her investigation had attracted the attention of people with resources far beyond what any normal criminal organization should possess. The coordination between the surveillance teams, the bureaucratic obstacles being placed in her path, and the sophisticated nature of the threats all pointed to a conspiracy that extended deep into the Phoenix Police Department itself. But it was Rex who provided the final clue that would transform Maya's investigation from reactive self-defense to proactive pursuit of justice. During one of their evening walks through a park near her apartment, Rex suddenly became agitated and began digging frantically at the base of an old oak tree. Hidden beneath 6 inches of soil wrapped in waterproof plastic, Maya discovered a small device that would change everything, a digital recorder containing hours of conversations between her father and someone he clearly trusted enough to discuss the details of his investigation. The voice on the recordings was Detective Marcus Webb. The digital recorder contained over 4 hours of conversations between Carlos Rodriguez and Marcus Webb, recorded during the final weeks of Carlos's life. As Maya listened to her father's voice echoing through her apartment speakers, she felt simultaneously closer to him than she had since his death and more terrified than she had ever been in her life. The recordings revealed that Carlos and Webb had been conducting a covert investigation into a drug trafficking operation that involved at least 6 members of the Phoenix Police Department, including 2 supervisors and a detective in the Evidence Control Unit. The conspiracy wasn't simply about stealing drugs from the lockup. It was a sophisticated operation that allowed major dealers to operate with impunity in exchange for percentage payments to their police protectors. The evidence room thefts are just the tip of the iceberg, Carlos's voice explained in one recording. They're providing security for shipments, tipping off dealers about raids, and eliminating competition by selectively enforcing drug laws. We're talking about millions of dollars in annual revenue flowing through this network. But the most shocking revelation came when Webb's voice responded with detailed knowledge about operation schedules, payment structures, and the identities of participating officers. Maya initially assumed that Webb was simply a dedicated investigator helping her father build the case. But as the recordings continued, a more disturbing picture emerged. Webb wasn't just investigating the corruption, he was managing it. "Carlos, you need to understand that this operation has protection all the way to the top," Webb's voice warned in one particularly chilling exchange. "Commissioner Bailey is personally involved, and they have judges on the payroll. If we move too fast without bulletproof evidence, we'll end up dead before we can testify." Maya's hands shook as she realized that Webb had been playing both sides, feeding information to Carlos while simultaneously reporting their progress to the very people they were investigating. Her father had trusted his partner completely, never suspecting that Webb was orchestrating his destruction from within. The final recording, dated just 3 days before Carlos's death, revealed the full scope of the trap that had been set for him. "I've got the location and time for the big shipment," Webb told Carlos. "This is our chance to catch them red-handed with enough product to bring down the entire network. But we need to move tonight before they change the schedule again." Carlos's voice was cautious but determined. "Are you sure about the backup if this goes wrong?" "Trust me, partner," Webb replied. "I've got everything covered." Maya stopped the recording, her stomach churning with the realization that she was listening to her father being led to his execution by the man he trusted most. Webb had deliberately isolated Carlos, sent him into a situation without proper backup, and ensured that the corrupt officers would be waiting for him. But Carlos hadn't been completely naive. The final files on the recorder contained encrypted data that Maya's father had compiled as insurance against exactly this kind of betrayal. Hidden within Rex's veterinary records, Carlos had documented every suspicious arrest pattern, every piece of missing evidence, and every financial anomaly that suggested corruption within the department. The turning point came when Maya realized that the recorder itself had been Rex's mission all along. Carlos had trained his partner to respond to a specific command, "Find Daddy's treasure," that would lead Rex to the hidden evidence cache. It wasn't coincidence that had led Rex to the oak tree. It was a carefully planned contingency that Carlos had hoped would never be necessary. Maya's investigation transformed from a personal quest for answers into an active threat to a conspiracy worth millions of dollars. The corrupt officers could afford to dismiss a grieving teenager asking uncomfortable questions, but they couldn't ignore someone who possessed detailed documentation of their criminal activities. The shift from reactive to proactive came when Maya made the decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of trying to stay hidden and safe, she would use her father's evidence to force a confrontation with the people who had killed him. But first, she needed to find allies who couldn't be compromised by the corruption that had claimed her father's life. Maya's research led her to FBI agent Patricia Santos, a federal investigator who specialized in police corruption cases and had a reputation for pursuing justice regardless of political pressure. Santos had been trying to build a case against Phoenix PD's drug unit for months, but her investigation had been hampered by the same bureaucratic obstacles that had frustrated Maya's search for answers. "Your father was a good cop who died trying to do the right thing," Santos told Maya during their first meeting in a secure location away from Phoenix. "But if we're going to honor his sacrifice, we need to do this right. The people who killed him have resources, connections, and a willingness to eliminate threats. If we move too fast or reveal our hand too early, we'll end up dead before we can testify." The alliance with Agent Santos marked the point of no return for Maya's investigation. She was no longer simply seeking answers about her father's death. She was actively building a federal case against a corruption network that extended throughout the Phoenix Police Department and into the city's political structure. But Webb and his associates weren't going to wait for the investigation to reach its conclusion. They had already demonstrated their willingness to kill police officers who threatened their operation, and Maya represented an even more direct threat to their survival. The war for justice had begun, and Maya Rodriguez was about to discover just how far her enemies would go to protect their secrets. The first attempt on Maya's life came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night when she was walking Rex through the empty parking lot behind her apartment building. The attack was professional and coordinated two unmarked vehicles moving to box her in, while a third provided overwatch from an elevated position in the nearby shopping center. Rex's warning saved her life. The German Shepherd's training kicked in as he detected the approaching vehicles before Maya even realized they were there. His low growl and defensive posture gave Maya the precious seconds she needed to recognize the threat and take evasive action. Instead of continuing toward her apartment, she cut through a gap in the fence that led to the adjacent neighborhood, using the darkness and Rex's superior senses to navigate terrain that her pursuers couldn't easily follow. "They're getting desperate," Agent Santos observed when Maya called her from a secure phone later that night. Professional hit teams don't usually miss their targets unless something goes very wrong with their operation. Maya had spent the remainder of the night in a FBI safe house, but she knew that hiding wasn't a sustainable long-term strategy. Webb and his associates had too many resources and too much to lose to simply give up and hope that Maya would eventually lose interest in her investigation. The psychological pressure intensified when Maya learned that Webb had been asking pointed questions about her activities around the police station. Several of her father's former colleagues reported that Webb was specifically interested in whether Maya had found any of Carlos's personal effects that might contain sensitive information. "He's trying to determine how much you know," Santos explained, "which means he's planning his next move based on how dangerous he thinks you are to the operation." The stakes escalated dramatically when Maya discovered that Webb had been manipulating the official investigation into her father's death, actively suppressing evidence that might have led to different conclusions about Carlos's murder. Forensic reports had been altered, witness statements had been edited, and key pieces of physical evidence had been declared inadmissible due to chain of custody irregularities. Maya's darkest moment came when she realized that she was essentially fighting the entire Phoenix Police Department. Even officers who weren't directly involved in the corruption were reluctant to challenge Webb's version of events, and several had been actively discouraged from cooperating with Maya's inquiries. Sometimes the system protects bad cops because admitting corruption exists means acknowledging that good cops died unnecessarily, Santos explained during one of their strategy sessions. "Your father's colleagues want to believe that he died heroically fighting criminals, not that he was murdered by his own partner." The building tension reached a breaking point when Webb made a crucial mistake. He approached Maya directly, attempting to manipulate her into abandoning her investigation through a combination of false sympathy and subtle threats. "Maya, your father would want you to move on with your life," Webb said during an encounter outside her high school. "He wouldn't want you putting yourself in danger chasing after conspiracy theories that can't bring him back." But Maya had been preparing for this confrontation since discovering the recordings. She wore a wire provided by Agent Santos, and her responses were carefully calculated to elicit incriminating statements from her father's killer. "Detective Webb, what exactly are you afraid I'm going to discover?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If my father's death was really just a drug deal gone wrong, why are you so concerned about my investigation?" Webb's composure cracked slightly as he realized that Maya's questions were more sophisticated than the random inquiries of a grieving teenager. "Some things are better left buried, Maya. Your father made choices that put him in a dangerous situation, and continuing down that path won't change what happened to him." The conversation provided Agent Santos with enough evidence to begin building obstruction of justice charges against Webb. But Maya knew that a successful prosecution would require much more than a recorded conversation. They needed evidence of the actual corruption network documentation of the drug trafficking operation and proof that Webb had deliberately orchestrated Carlos's death. The final preparation for the climax began when Maya and Agent Santos developed a plan to force Webb into revealing the full scope of the conspiracy. Using the evidence that Carlos had hidden with Rex, they would create a situation where Webb would have to choose between protecting himself and protecting his co-conspirators. The plan was dangerous and would require Maya to place herself in direct physical danger, but it was the only way to gather the evidence needed for a successful federal prosecution. Rex would be essential to the operation's success. The dog's training and his unique knowledge of Carlos's investigative methods made him the perfect tool for navigating the psychological battlefield that the final confrontation would create. As Maya prepared for what she knew would be the most dangerous night of her life, she found herself thinking about her father's final months and the courage it must have taken for him to continue pursuing justice, even when he suspected that his own partner might be working against him. "Dad, I'm going to finish what you started," Maya whispered to Rex, as they prepared for the operation that would either expose her father's killers or result in her own death. "Whatever happens tomorrow night, they're going to pay for what they did to you." The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether Carlos Rodriguez's sacrifice had been in vain or whether his daughter would succeed in bringing his killers to justice. Maya had moved far beyond the grieving teenager who had attended a dog auction 6 months earlier. She was now a formidable adversary with federal backing, crucial evidence, and an unshakable determination to see justice done. Webb and his associates were about to discover that they had seriously underestimated both Maya's capabilities and her resolve. The confrontation took place in the same industrial warehouse where Maya had first bid on Rex, a location chosen specifically because it represented the full circle of her journey from grieving daughter to determined seeker of justice. Agent Santos had arranged for the meeting through intermediaries, presenting it to Webb as an opportunity to recover the evidence that Carlos had hidden before his death. Maya arrived first with Rex at her side and FBI surveillance teams positioned throughout the surrounding area. The warehouse's cavernous interior was dimly lit by a few overhead fixtures, creating pools of light separated by deep shadows, where federal agents waited with recording equipment and tactical support. Webb entered exactly on schedule, but he wasn't alone. Detective Ray Morrison from the Evidence Control Unit and Sergeant Lisa Chen accompanied him, along with 2 men in civilian clothes who were clearly armed and dangerous despite their casual appearance. "Maya," Webb said, his voice carrying the same false concern that had characterized all of his interactions with her, since her father's death. I'm glad you finally decided to be reasonable about this situation. I want to know exactly how my father died. Maya replied, her hand resting on Rex's head for both comfort and tactical advantage. Not the official story, not the department's version, the truth. Webb's composure was perfect, the result of 20 years of practice at maintaining lies under pressure. Your father died because he got in over his head investigating dangerous people. Sometimes good cops pay the price for doing their jobs. But Maya had learned from Agent Santos how to conduct interrogations, and she was prepared for Webb's deflections. The recordings say something different, Detective Webb. They say that you led my father into a trap. The mention of recordings caused a visible reaction among Webb's companions. Morrison stepped forward aggressively, but Webb gestured for him to stay back. The careful choreography of the confrontation was beginning to break down as the participants realized that Maya possessed more evidence than they had anticipated. "What recordings?" Webb asked, his voice still controlled, but with an edge that suggested his famous composure was finally beginning to crack. Maya reached into her jacket and produced the digital recorder that Rex had led her to months earlier. 4 hours of conversations between you and my father, discussions about drug trafficking, corrupt officers, and your plans to eliminate the investigation before it could expose everyone involved. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Webb's associates realized that their criminal activities had been documented in detail. Morrison drew his weapon, but Rex was already moving, his police training taken over as he neutralized the threat before it could develop. The German Shepherd's takedown was textbook perfect, demonstrating exactly why K9 units were so valuable in high-stress tactical situations. Agent Santos and her team emerged from concealment as Webb made a desperate attempt to destroy the evidence, but Maya had anticipated this possibility. The recorder she had shown was a decoy. The real evidence was already in federal custody, along with digital copies stored in multiple secure locations. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for the murder of Detective Carlos Rodriguez and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, Santos announced as tactical agents secured the scene. Webb's final words were directed at Maya. "You don't understand what you've done. This goes higher than you can imagine." The federal investigation that followed Maya's confrontation with Webb ultimately exposed a corruption network that extended far beyond the Phoenix Police Department. Commissioner Bailey was arrested, along with 6 other high-ranking officials, and the resulting scandal led to comprehensive reforms in police oversight and evidence-handling procedures. Maya testified before a federal grand jury her courage in pursuing justice, despite enormous personal risk-earning recognition from law enforcement agencies across the country. The successful prosecution of her father's killers provided the closure she had been seeking, but it also opened new chapters in her life that she hadn't anticipated. Agent Santos offered Maya an internship with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, recognizing talents that could be valuable in future investigations. Maya accepted, but only after finishing high school and ensuring that Rex would be able to continue his career in federal service. Rex himself became something of a legend within law enforcement circles. His unique role in exposing police corruption led to his appointment as a federal K9 officer, making him one of the few dogs to serve at both state and federal levels during his career. More importantly, His partnership with Maya demonstrated the value of persistence and courage in pursuing justice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Phoenix Police Department underwent major reforms in the wake of the scandal, with new oversight procedures designed to prevent the kind of corruption that had claimed Carlos Rodriguez's life. A memorial fund established in Carlos's honor provided scholarships for children of fallen officers and supported programs aimed at improving police-community relations. Maya's apartment was no longer under surveillance, but she maintained many of the security precautions that had kept her alive during the investigation. The experience had changed her fundamental understanding of justice and the price that people sometimes pay for doing what's right. On quiet evenings, Maya and Rex would visit the cemetery where Carlos Rodriguez was buried, bringing flowers and sharing updates about their continuing work together. Maya had discovered that seeking justice wasn't a destination, but an ongoing commitment that required constant vigilance and unwavering determination. The auction that had brought Maya and Rex together had been the beginning of a partnership that extended far beyond their personal relationship. They had become symbols of the possibility that ordinary citizens could challenge corruption and succeed even when facing seemingly impossible odds. Maya's story inspired other families affected by police misconduct to pursue their own investigations, leading to additional prosecutions and reforms. The network of corruption that had seemed so powerful and untouchable had ultimately been brought down by a 17-year-old girl, a retired police dog, and their shared commitment to honoring the memory of a good cop who had died trying to do the right thing. The warehouse where everything had started was eventually converted into a training facility for police K-9 units, with a plaque honoring Detective Carlos Rodriguez and his contribution to law enforcement integrity. Maya attended the dedication ceremony standing beside Rex as speakers praised their courage and determination. "Dad would be proud," Maya whispered to Rex as the ceremony concluded. The German Shepherd's gentle nuzzle against her hand seemed to confirm that Carlos Rodriguez's sacrifice had not been in vain, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, would ultimately prevail for those brave enough to pursue it.